welcome. This is Salt on Earth Podcast, and I'm your host, Maria. And I'm so excited for this week's episode. It's the third episode, y'all, and I'm just so excited. Today's gonna be a little bit different. I know I've been saying the next week is gonna be regular. I'm just going from what the Lord has just been pouring out to me, and this week we're gonna talk about my testimony in debt. I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible because I know details are just kind of boring. Before we start, I just want to mention if there's any prayers, put it in the comments down below. And my prayer for the week is for me to be able to be consistent in my quiet time. My schedule is changing a little bit, so yeah. So the verse of the week, and I chose it because I feel like this just describes my testimony in a way that I just wouldn't before. So it's Psalms 40 verse 1, 2, and 2. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire, and he set my feet on the rock, gave me a firm place to stand. Like, that is just so, it's just, yeah, y'all gonna see why I chose that. So where do I start? Y'all? Because there's just so much. So I'll start with a little bit background of myself, I guess. So I come from Venezuela. I am a Venezuelan person. I came to the United States when I was 9. I'm not 23 when y'all see this. I've been here essentially almost my whole life, but I will describe kind of like my relationship with my parents because I feel like that's where it all starts. This is no hate to them because, again, we cannot judge people if they're not following the word. If they are proclaimed Christians and they tell themselves that they're Christians, that okay, I can understand. So my relationship with my parents was, especially my mom, was kind of rocky. Vocal as a kid, I was very I've always been emotional. I've always been a person that wears her heart on her sleeve. They don't deal with their emotions. And that generation doesn't deal with their emotions. And it was kind of like, shut up, don't talk, it doesn't matter what you feel. And again, I'm not really blaming on them. It's just more generational than anything. Because I grew up, feeling I can't say that word, unvalidated. Every mistake, everything that I did, I just kept to myself because I was afraid of getting yelled at. It just always, I always just shut up my emotions. I've always had a hard childhood. I grew up really quickly. When it came to an emotional part of my life, I grew up very quickly when it came to that because, again, my parents were emotionally unstable and I had to take care of them in the sense of emotional. Some people that have taken care of their parents overall as a kid, but for me it was more of I was their punching bag. I was their, I'm sad, let me go to Maria. And it's just a kid, so I'm just I'm just listening and I'm just giving advice. That was just how it was, And as I grew up, I was very fortunate to have everything I wanted, as in physical. I wanted this, I'll have it. I think that sums up my childhood pretty well. Okay, so there's a series of events in my childhood that were traumatic. I didn't know what to do, and again, I just shut it off. I just shut it off in my mind. Never talked about it. I never think about it. I just put it back in my mind and just forgot about it. As I grew up, as I started growing up, and I started realizing that the world isn't butterflies and rainbows, because I was kind of innocent in that way. I started realizing the evil, and I started realizing my trauma that I had going on. Like, it kind of hit me because I kind of numbed myself. Like, when I was a kid, I just I was like, whatever, it's something that happened. So I just threw it in the back of my mind, but it always stuck to me, if that makes sense. And as I grew up older, like around 14, 15, I started getting extremely depressed, and I started getting, how do I say this without getting demonetized? I started getting thoughts and, thoughts. And so, yeah, I started just feeding into that, and I just started just becoming extremely depressed. Like, I mean, for around 4 or 5 years, I was just, I didn't take care of my hygiene. I didn't take care of anything. I was just a walking dissociative person. Like, I really don't really remember my middle school well, in that aspect, because I was just always, like, when I just remember my middle school years, because I was a year behind in school. When I remember my middle school years and all that, because I was 13, I was 15 in like 7th grade or something, I don't know. So when I was in that stages, I feel like I was so dissociative. Like, I remember the only way I would be able to express my emotions is I will wake up, I'll feel just numbness, and I'll just feel this unworthiness of myself. I would go to school, and I would go in the stalls and cry. I would just cry and cry and cry my eyes out, because I just didn't have any other way to cry but in silence. Like, I would just cry in my bedroom alone, and I would just cry myself to sleep. I'm gonna cry. Because I never showed that, vulnerability to anybody. I was just like, I'm fine. Editing Maria here. I just wanted to say that I also didn't know what was going on. I was just like, I thought I was just depressed. I thought there was something wrong with me. But little did I know, it was because I was dealing with so much trauma that, everything was coming up in different ways that I never realized or comprehend until, like, later. I, like, looking back at those moments, I was looking for love. Somebody to love me, somebody to care, somebody, like, I remember saying, I just want somebody to know what I'm going through and tell me that it's okay, that everything's going to be okay. Like, I remember thinking that, and I just remember wanting somebody to save me, and, looking back, I'm like, Maria, he's right there. He's right there. Jesus. And I remember I just want a savior. I remember just saying those words, and it's like, I want a savior. I want somebody to save me from this, because I felt like I was drowning in my sorrow. I was drowning in what I at that time I didn't realize it was trauma, but looking back, it's because my entire childhood I felt unworthy, and I felt like nothing mattered, like nothing out of my mouth mattered. That kind of, I think, brought forth the depression, and that was my entire middle school to not senior year, freshman year. I was legit depressed, and I remember just feeling like I drowned. And I feel like I know why God wants me to I know why God wants me to put this on my birthday. Because every single year for my birthday since 2017, I think, I've been depressed on my birthday. Every single year of my birthday, I wished I was not here. I didn't want to be here. And the fact that he wants me to put this on my birthday is a testimony of God's goodness, of God's love. And that was just what my mindset was. I was just surviving middle school at this point. I felt, my entire life, I feel like I had to raise myself emotionally. So now, when it came to how I was living my life in confusion, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know, in that time of year, it's pretty common that you don't know what the heck you're doing with your life because you're 14. It was just a mental confusion, a mental, I will say demonic confusion, because I was just searching for something to be, somewhere to belong, and I started feeling like I was a lesbian. Well, I was. I'm not gonna sit here and be like I wasn't, or like I feel like it, because if you ever struggle with that, it is very real. It is same-sex attraction. It is what it is. Like, it's real, and it's something I feel. If you haven't dealt with it, you're going to just be like, oh, just stop. I started, in the midst of my confusion and my depression, I started looking for ways to just entertain myself. Keep in mind, my entire childhood has been sexualized, and in the sense of, I found porn at the age of, if I remember, because I remember it was a game that I watched. I was in this certain apartment in Venezuela, I remember, but I don't remember. I think it was either 5 or 6. I was that young. I encountered, that side. I became addicted. I immediately became addicted, and I don't know how my 5-year-old, 6-year-old brain would know that was bad. I don't know that. How am I gonna, innately I knew it was wrong. So I hid it from my parents, of course. I had already been watching, and I was masturbating at the age of 5. Okay, I was already, in that by the age of 5 or 6. And so it was, my mind was already kind of twisted, and my mind was already twisted and confused, because I felt like that was right, but then I felt I was wrong. I was always internally battling that, even though that, I didn't know Christ. I didn't know who Jesus was. Even though I grew up Catholic, I feel like I love my fellow Catholics, and I'm not saying the true Christian Catholics, but I'm just saying in Venezuela it's a lot more common to be culturally Catholic, and I'm Catholic. I was more taught about Mary and the angels than I was with God, because that's a whole generational thing, because my grandma was more into Freemason. And then was it Freemason? I think it's Freemason. Kind of teachings than anything. Yes, it is culty, but whatever. And I think they teach about Jesus in Freemason. Anyway, so I started so around 14. Yeah, so around 14 I started liking, because at this time it was Musically, so I started liking a lot of like Musically people, and I was just like getting attracted to a lot of them. I had kissed my childhood best friend. He had kind of like, I had already like a history with, wanting being a lesbian, because I already had a kind of a history consuming that stuff and also doing stuff, I guess. I've always been this. I was been butchery, which I was a kid that I hated dresses. I hated I was just a tomboy. This girl, like, I was still girly. I was just not in, dresses. So I thought in some other way, I was like, yeah, like, I just love I love girls, There's so many aspects of the, like, I'm picking the easiest ones because there's just more into why I identified as a lesbian. Yeah, so that was my life. I would literally talk with men, and I would talk to girls. If you know about the whole kick thing, what you do in kick stays in kick. Well, I'm airing that, babe. I was so promiscuous, and this might not be like a big deal for a lot of people, because they're like, oh yeah, it's all on the internet. It's all in it. Yes, but it still has almost the same impact as a relationship, I guess. So I had a lot of, I would just post, I didn't post myself, but I was a 16-year-old girl literally exploring her body on the internet. You wonder why my parents didn't, right? I would block them. So I would block them, and there's a lot of situations where family members that I forgot existed would text my mom and be like, what is she going on? Which is honestly the best thing they did, but I honestly did whatever I wanted. I just kept blocking and blocking and blocking. So I was very promiscuous. I would, just sex talk on the internet. So I was living that lifestyle, and then, what was it? Fast forward, 2019 was the year. I feel like it was the worst year for everything. Like, I was the most depressed. I was the most promiscuous ever. Like, now it was starting to get to the point where I never did it, but I was going to be more physical with people. It was the year where, things were getting to the opposite side. And before we continue, I wanted to say that this entire time that I was depressed from 6th grade to 9th grade, I had multiple therapists, multiple pills. Like, nothing worked. Like, literally nothing worked. Every pill made me feel like I was in myself. The therapist literally did not anything but hear me talk, not even suggesting anything. Or I think they did, but I feel like since my mom was like, oh, nothing's changing, I wanted a radical change. She was like, no, there's nothing happening, blah blah blah. So I changed a lot of therapists. I changed a lot of medications. I was a victim and fell victim to Big Pharma. Me and my mom, because obviously she thought and she trusted all these medical professionals, and I got worse. Another thing, I've always felt like since I got depressed, I've always felt that I wasn't going to make it past I wasn't going to make it past 18. Like, I felt like something was going to happen at 18 that I was not longer going to be here. I don't know what it was. Now that I realize, I think it was a plan from the enemy. God gave me the gift of prophecy, so I'm a huge believer. Your gifts have always been yours since you were a kid. You know, you have to exercise. You have to make it a skill. You can't just, do it like that. But, looking back, I realized it was probably my spirit was sensing that, the enemy had a plan to end my life. He had a plan to exterminate me, to make me feel like I was worthless, to make me feel like I didn't belong, to quiet me down. But guess what? I'm here and I'm telling the story of Jesus Christ, that he saved my life. He saved my life radically, and I love him. So 2019, it was the worst year. This was the year where I was constantly self-deprecating, if I could put it like that. Self-deprecating. This was the year where I started dabbling in sleeping pills, but in the wrong way. Sleeping pills, I don't know what the heck I was with, like allergy medications. Like, I would just tap into my mom's depression pills. Like, I will literally just do anything to not feel anything. I was just in a rough spot. Like, I genuinely was like, you know what? I'm worthless. I am such a scum of earth, and I remember just like being such an atheist at this point, that I was like, God doesn't even exist, like he's whatever. And then 2019 happened. Well, it was 2019, but I call the situation 2019. So there was a situation, I'm not gonna go into detail about it, but there was a situation in my life that was extremely traumatic. It was extremely hard. I don't know how to word it, but everybody in my family came against me, and there's no hate towards everybody. Everybody came against me from this specific thing that happened, and this is when the first time I ever experienced anxiety, because at that point I just experienced depression, but this time, this is where I was the most anxious, and I started having panic attacks from this one incident. And the world was turned against me, and this is where at that time I was into New Age, but I remember before all that happened, I was already wanting to take my life. And somehow, after years of feeling like I was drowning, feeling like I was a piece of garbage in the floor, somehow I had this hope that I never had before. I found this peace that I never had before, and I was like, oh, it's from my spirit guide. I felt I felt like living again. I felt like I could live again and I could survive this. And I was like, you know what, Maria, you can you can do this. You can survive this. And well, after that incident, I changed schools to a Christian school, and I remember before going to that school, my friends, I was like, yeah, like I'm gonna turn these people and I'm going to say that Jesus isn't Lord. And I was just I was like, how did God didn't strike me right away right there? Because I wouldn't even dare that to say that right now, because what? Remember just having this peace that I've never had before. And I went to this school for 10th grade, and you know, I was still in my ways, okay? I was still in my ways, and I did horrible things that I don't want to mention here. I would just do horrible things because I was like, Jesus isn't real. And I was very perverted. So at this time, I had a girlfriend, and I just had two. I had two. One of them, one of them I was attached to, and I was so attached to her. I thought I was gonna marry her. I thought this whole thing was a thing. Oh, I was so lost, and so I thought I loved this. We're gonna call her Rose. So Rose is a girl that I was with in online. You know, I just did horrible things, and like the church. Because I was so blind. And I am not going to discuss that here because it's truly disgusting. That is what it is. But little did I know, my Bible class, my Bible teacher, he was a sweetheart. He was a literal sweetheart, and I will always be grateful for him. So he will always just like he will always talk about the Proverbs. It planted a seed in me. There was a point where we were broke, and my phone didn't have a line, and so I started having a desire to read my Bible. And so I started reading the Bible on the Bible app, and I was just like, read it. I'm like, wow. Like, I just instantly fell in love. I was like, wow, that's so cool. And even though I didn't understand it, I was like, whatever I was reading, I was like, oh my god, this is so good. Like, wow, like the Bible is good. The Bible like eats. And I would just read it because I had to wait. I was in after school because I had to wait for my mom to get there. And yeah, I would just read it, and it was just such a blessing to me. And then the pandemic happened. And that's when, literally probably like February, like a month after the pandemic started happening. Before that, I the girl broke up with me, and that was like the worst heartbreak I've ever experienced in my life, which is ironic because I wasn't innocent. Like, I became depressed again because I was so attached to this girl. I was so hurt. I was so hurt from this whole relationship thing. And I remember one day, it was pandemic, and I was like, if you're real, show me. Like, I screamed. I was like, because at that point I kind of had like a little bit of belief in me that God was real. And it was like a seed planted in me. After that, that's when I started to change. And editing Maria here, I just wanted to say that I was saved here. At this point, I was already saved, for like a few weeks or a few months. So I just wanted to add that. I started reading my Bible. No, I started watching testimonies about, God saving them, and I just started just truly listening in into what God had to say. Until one point I was like, Dad, can you get me a Bible? Because I need to read this. And actually, she's present right here. This one right here is my first Bible ever. Now I have like 50. That's when the journey started happening, and I started falling in love with Jesus more. And I truly fell in love with Jesus, and He radically saved me. From one day to another, it wasn't right away, but from one day to another, I truly struggled with it with same-sex attraction again. And yeah, and that, and also my depression was completely gone. I was more tolerant. I was, just joyful, and it was such a truly, I truly enjoyed my my honeymoon with the Lord. Demons stick to trauma, and they stick to unforgiveness and all that. So I had all that in my heart because I didn't know there was a spiritual side to being a Christian. I just thought it was just loving Jesus and not sinning. That's literally what I thought it was. And I think that's why He let me be in those 3 years of like just pure trial. Those years were a whole thing. And I could make a whole another testimony, but I feel like that's for another day, another season. So, so fast forward to last year, I did get baptized on the old church that I was in, but I didn't know what the heck I was doing. It is not recommendable to do that. I feel like the other one was to mark my relationship with God, but this one was to mark, that I'm truly fully living for Him now, and that nothing will separate me from Him. That's what God was the one that was like, yeah, baptize yourself again. Well, not myself, but my church that I go to now that I super, super, super love. 2023, I was in a pure isolation season. I was in a season of just being completely isolated from everybody. Yes, I had 2 friends. Obviously, God won't just put me in an isolation season and be like, here you go, like, deal with it yourself. It was a struggle. I feel like I grew. To that point, I never realized who I was. Like, I felt like there was just a lot more that I had to deal with. I had my isolation period, and a few months ago, I got off of it, and I am living fully, truly for Jesus, how He intended me to be in the first place. So, yeah, I hope you guys liked it. Be the salt of the earth, and